energy and sustainability, and global order. We're always open for collaboration. Stay in touch with us. Do not hesitate to approach us with your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions. And we promise you that you will hear from us regularly about our ideas and what we do to convert them into reality.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to the last session today at the GlovSec Digital Stage. My name is Zuzana Pison and I'm a technology stream lead at the GlovSec Policy Institute. And it is my great pleasure to lead the following discussion on how automation will reshape the workforce of tomorrow. First of all, I would like to introduce my very special guest. So we'll be speaking to Gertrude de Catelere. She's a program director of artificial intelligence at IMEG, which is an R&D and innovation hub in nanoelectronics and digital technologies in the Netherlands. Then we'll be speaking to Pavel Mik, who's the country managing director, Slovakia at ABB, and he's also the manager of robotics for Eastern Europe at ABB. Another guest is Nikolai Stoyanov. He's a policy officer at Future of Work at the European Commission. And last but not least, we'll be speaking to David Timis, who's an outgoing QRT at the Global Shapers community. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. I also want to encourage our audience to ask questions, and we'll be trying to answer them at the end of the discussion. So now I would like to briefly introduce our topic today. We have seen that the exponential growth of AI raised concern about job automation and the possibility of massive unemployment and widening skills gap. These developments have been further exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic with the accelerated digitalization and disruptions on the labor markets across the whole world. So I would like to turn to you, Nikolai, first to give us an overview of the situation in Europe with regards to automation, meaning like which types of jobs, for example, are most likely to be displaced in Europe, and which roles have the lowest risk of being automated, and these kind of general questions, so that we know what is actually the situation in Europe these days.
Yes, thank you very much, Susanna. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to take part into this very exciting and interesting panel. And before I answer your question, if I might make a rather general statement about exactly the sort of discourse which we have in Europe about automation, which is most of the time is about doom and gloom, and that a lot of jobs will be lost, and that basically masses of people will be left without anything to do, unemployed. And what we see and what we think actually is rather that this is not be the case, as the ongoing wave of automation would most likely affect specific tasks within jobs rather than replace jobs themselves. And this, of course, if you look at the historical perspective, is not the first time when we see such massive shifts in the economic landscape. I mean, of course, you have the Industrial Revolution, switching from agriculture to factories, where a lot of people moved, and then you had a lot of people moving from manufacturing to services. So from this point of view, there's not really an overwhelming cause for concern with regards to job losses. But as you correctly pointed out, we will be seeing some shifts in the labor markets. And if I look a little bit into the type of jobs that are threatened by automation, by AI, the newest, which is the newest exemplification of the digital revolution, is it the sort of a routine or mundane, rich tasks, such as, for example, analytical or administrative or clerical jobs, where there's like highly repetitive or rules-based tasks. So these are quite easily automated. And if you look a bit more specific, this could be professions like, for example, office assistants or people working in finance and accounting. There is also people working at cashiers or drivers, so on and so forth, which are really jobs which are quite susceptible to automation. And when we translate this into the sort of skills required, which I'll come back to later on, because the importance of skills is really cannot be overstated here in managing the transitions. We see that it's mostly low and medium skilled jobs that are at higher risk of automation. And on the other spectrum, when you look at jobs that are not so easily automatable or that are not at high risk at this point in time, because of course everything we speak depends on how technology AI develops, which I'm sure my fellow panel speakers will also speak about, is that we have these sort of jobs which are very rich in the sort of inherently human skills, which is something like social intelligence or like the ability to negotiate complex social relationships. For example, if you care for others, or if you have to manage cultural sensitivities, or if you have to use a lot of cognitive intelligence, these are the type of skills that are not very easily automatable. So the type of jobs that rely on these will not be so much at risk. And I think I'll stop here because I think I spoke quite a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you have something to add to Nikolai's perspective?
It was a great perspective, first of all. Thank you for sharing, Nikolai, and also thank you for the organizers for inviting me. Maybe just to kind of sum up a bit some of the things Nikolai said and maybe add a few numbers to it. I've recently done some research around the topic of the impact that both automation and the current crisis has on jobs in Europe. And most of the, let's say, top-notch research has actually been done by McKinsey. So I base some of these numbers I'm going to provide on their research. McKinsey and company has done some great reports recently on the subject. And I think what's very important to realize is that automation is a threat and has been a threat. However, COVID-19 has exponentially increased the risk of jobs being displaced by automation because there's also now a health element to it. It's easier to, as let's say a manager of a warehouse, it's easier to say, well, I will replace some humans with robots now that there's social distancing or physical distancing in place. There's definitely an impetus given to automation. And just to give you a few numbers, so at the moment, 51 million jobs, according to the study I quoted from McKinsey, 51 million jobs in Europe are at risk of automation, and potentially 59 million are at risk because of the COVID-19 crisis. The problem is 24 million, so 1/3 of the number I just mentioned, sorry, 1/4, is actually at risk both of COVID and automation. So these are the jobs that I think already Nikolai described, jobs which are at risk because they're physical jobs because jobs at risk because they have a lot of interactions between human face-to-face interactions. So I think what we have to keep in mind is that COVID-19 has exaggerated automation, and also not just automation per se, but also anxiety because of automation. So I think going forward in this discussion, we should definitely speak a bit about how to prepare people to be more emotionally and mentally balanced, because one of the downsides of this, as I said, crisis is the anxiety that has been created, which is due to automation as well. So happy to bring back this topic when we speak about skills again with Nikolai. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for pointing this aspect of the debate as well, and I'm sure we'll come back to it. I would like to give floor to Mika now, who's an expert in AI and a very experienced researcher in the field. And I would therefore like to ask her which business streams are most likely to capitalize on the new technologies such as AI and robotics.
Yeah, thanks first of all for having me. It's a great pleasure. And indeed, I'm just going to align with my colleagues what they've already said. On AI specific, there's some misunderstandings there. I mean, AI was originally created to replace the DDD jobs, so the dull, dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs. But AI can only be used in an area where automated decisions can have some uncertainty. And this little thing seems to be lost. If you want to have a decision automated that needs to have 100% accuracy, it's not the place where you're going to use AI. That's a limitation. Another limitation is the fact that AI is very good in learning and learning new things, but it's not very good in reasoning. That's where AI is limited compared to human ability. So if you look at COVID and the situation, you have seen that the context of the world has changed a lot, and understanding that change requests some reasoning, some adaptation, in order to get an explanation. AI is not there yet. So if I look into what Europe could help us with in the AI space, is making sure that the adoption, because it does create great value, but that the adoption get increased by putting on more focus on explainable AI, just explaining why decisions are made, making sure that people get less frustrated or less scared of the solutions, but also the responsibility that needs to be taken by business because of the limitations I was saying, the limitations at the level of the reasoning part, the changing context of the world, which is not automatically picked up by AI, and the fact that AI always works with a little uncertainty. So these limitations are, unknown to me, and I think Europe can help there to put some principles in place to get this translation further. Just like we have when we take medication, we get a leaflet explaining how it works, what the dangers are, how we have to, what products are in there. I'd love to see the same on AI. So seeing what data was used, where is it useful, what are the potential risks, when do you have to stop using the system, etc. That would be great.
Yeah, so which leads me to another question. So what do you think, which policies need to be put in place by national governments or the EU to help address this? Is it just the informational function, as Mika just said, or are there some other potential aspects of the debate related to AI that should be tackled by upcoming regulations? I think this could be an interesting question for Pavel, who has a very unique perspective from the private sector.
First, thanks also for inviting me for the panel. I would also first like to react to what was said before. The threat of losing jobs, has been here since the first automation 200 years ago. And what we are witnessing is that basically people are reskilling, and what we will be witnessing in the future, that the reskilling will be much faster than ever, because it has something to do with this computing power and increase of the technology ability, right? So on one side, we are replacing certain jobs with automation. On the other side, there is demand for the new jobs. And the OECD, before COVID, actually estimated that in 2022 will be 133 million new jobs that didn't exist before. And also this reskilling actually is going extremely fast. So in 10 years, there is actually estimate that there will be 1 billion jobs needed with reskilling skills. We are all actually being taught by the new technologies voluntarily or not, with mobile phones and everything. But this is basically where we are at the moment headed. As for the government's help or basically framework, what we are actually witnessing is that the technology is much faster. And what Mika said about artificial intelligence, if you look at most of the artificial intelligence applications and put into this Gartner hype cycle, we are still in the beginning. So we haven't actually exploit the benefits commercially much so far, but we are really on the start of exploring the artificial intelligence. And of course, because the development is going so drastically fast, the states actually are always behind that. So I don't see that there is actually much that the state can do in kind of regulating it. What we should actually make sure is that we enable people to absorb it, so they are actually teaching quickly and they are flexible in learning. So that would be my point.
Thank you. Pavel, both you and I are based in Slovakia, in the heart of Central Europe, which is very much dependent on the automotive sector, which is under great risk of automation. So what do you think, what will the AI and robotics bring to the region, and what needs to happen in the region so that we can actually survive this transition?
I would say that we have to, I'll just repeat what I said basically, because what we have to do is enable people to bring high added value. So education is the key for me. We will see actually that the automation, and actually automotive is actually one of the pioneers and and a great exploiter of automation, right? And we really have to make sure that what we have in Central Europe is the skilled labor force, and then not only people in the automotive or car manufacturers companies, the people that are working online, but that we have actually R&D and people who can actually develop things, right? So yes, we see actually general kind of hiccup in the automotive at the moment, but it's also brought with certain uncertainty. But I don't think that it's the biggest problem. I mean, there will be disruption also in automotive. I mean, shared economy of cars, self-driving cars, and so on. So, but we will just have to deal with it.
Yes, and which leads me to another question directed at Nikolai. So can you please enlighten us what are the ongoing policy efforts on the EU level related to automation and the transformation of the labor market?
Yeah, sure. First of all, when we speak about our policy responses to the challenges related to AI in the sphere of employment, in the social and employment aspects, we have this sort of overall guiding framework, which is the European Pillar of Social Rights, which is basically 20 principles which call for decent working conditions, social protection, and equal opportunities for all. So this is the sort of guiding document that frames our discussions. And if I have to speak a bit more concretely about the ongoing or recent initiatives that we have, as was pointed out by Pavel, but also the other colleagues, the importance of skill, we also recognize it in European level, and that's why in the beginning of July we launched the youth employment support package, which among other things also focuses on skills, and which with which we're taking action to give young people the support they need to actually realize their full potential and deal with the challenges from the green and the digital transitions. Also, we launched at the same time the European Skills Agenda, which is basically a 5-year plan ahead to help individuals, but also businesses to develop better skills, which are also key for tackling the challenges of automation, as also something that connects quite well with what David said about the anxiety among some people about changes coming from automation, but also what Miki mentioned about the sort of a framework needed to regulate or to deal with some aspects of AI. Colleagues are working on also on embracing the opportunities, but also tackling the socioeconomic challenges coming from AI. You might be aware there was a white paper launched in February that looks at how we can foster European ecosystems of excellence and trust when it comes to AI. So at the moment we are working on this, and we look forward to actually coming up with a more concrete framework in the beginning of 2021, which also will be dealing with the socioeconomic impacts of AI. Also, we are working on, if we focus on some of the new business models that are made available or made possible by new technologies, such as the platform economy, platform work. We are currently working on an initiative to improve the labor conditions in platform work, which is also planned for next year, basically where we look at how to achieve more dignified, transparent, and predictable working conditions for people working in platform work, and which are some of the people who are at the front lines now, together with medics, with the medical personnel, in providing so-called essential services. No, because when we were in lockdowns and people couldn't or wouldn't want to go to the supermarket, I'm sure that most of us had at least once recently used food delivery guys services. So these are the sort of things we're looking into when it comes to platform work. And also, if I have to touch upon a little bit on what is the role of COVID here in this, of course, as David mentioned, we indeed realize or recognize that it is a sort of accelerator and sort of a driver of changes or shifts we already see. And as David said, I think in some sectors there is a really significant overlap in the sort of jobs that are threatened by both automation and COVID, which is I think up to 70% in the wholesale and retail sectors, for example. So this is this is indeed, COVID makes it all the more urgent to tackle the challenges that are stemming from automation. And I think I'll stop here and I'll maybe come back. Yep, sorry, please.
Yeah, I want to turn the debate more, again, a bit more towards COVID, and I'd like to ask a question directed to David, related to whether the EU has also responded to the COVID-induced situation on the labor markets with like some more, let's say, short-term measures. So what has been kind of like the most immediate response?
I mean, with all due respect, I think this question should be posed to Nikolai because he's representing the European Commission. I can give an answer, of course, as well as a citizen, in which I think definitely there's a lot more work to be done at the EU level when it comes to supporting each other as fellow European citizens. We all seen how initially there was a slower response than we all have wanted to when it comes to supporting Italy, not just for their situation in terms of jobs and unemployment, but the health crisis itself. However, the European Commission and the EU itself, from my perspective, again, as a citizen, has stepped up since. So it was a shaky beginning, but since there has been a lot of interesting initiatives targeted especially to tackle unemployment and, you know, the European skills agenda, which is being rehashed. But again, I would leave Nikolai maybe to give more details because I don't want to steal the limelight since he's representing the European Commission in this discussion.
Yes,
Nikolai?
indeed. Thanks a lot, David. But as you correctly pointed out, it was indeed challenging times in the very beginning. But a lot has been done since then. If I can focus on a few things, for example, we were in the very beginning we launched the Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative, which basically made the use of available cohesion and structural funding much more flexible and easy to respond. Also, we had we launched quite quickly an instrument to support, for example, short-term schemes, as Susanna pointed out, the so-called support to mitigate unemployment risks. And also, I'm sure, and I think you probably have already discussed this yesterday in one of the sessions, is that there was really a major recovery package which was proposed at the end of May and rubber stamped by European leaders in July. This which is the Next Generation EU, which basically is a huge financial investment in the recovery of the continent, and which is also going to support tackling the challenges which we're speaking about. So this is maybe just in a nutshell, but there is a lot more being done, and it's been quite busy times here, I can say, for us as well.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your a really insightful overview of the efforts being done on the EU level. I would like to dig a bit deeper into the potential of AI, and that would lead me to another question directed to Mike. And could you please name one or two specific fields which will be most affected by AI in the nearest future?
Yeah, sure. And I'm allowing myself to pick into the COVID discussion because the COVID discussion shows also the limitation of AI in the sense that if you look at the algorithms that were created in the past by Amazon, etc., due to the changing shopping behavior, they all had to be stopped. I don't know if people are aware of this, but a lot of algorithms went completely wrong in their propositions, which shows also the limitations of AI from one perspective. From another perspective, we noticed that the need for open data in order to have quicker insights, you know, about the places where COVID was picking up quite hard, that the need for this data platforms, open data, ethics by design, transparency by design, that this is something where Europe can lead, because we don't, you know, based on the GDPR, we have a good, you know, baseline, but we can build on this to go on and put best practices for AI cases here as well. Now, talking about these limitations, it's also interesting to look forward to, you know, what are going to be the next phases that are needed in order to make sure that AI is going to, you know, remain in the summer we are right now. And the summer, I mean, is there's a lot of investment, there's a lot of excitement, etc. So if we want to make sure that AI remains and brings more value, there's three domains that we have to solve. So the first one is the fact that AI, people are not aware of this, is consuming a huge amount of energy, which of course is in conflict with our sustainability goals. So from a certain level, we have to look at, you know, reducing the energy level that our systems are using without touching the accuracy in the decisions it's making. So that's one area we have to focus on. A second area we have to focus on is on the very narrow functionality that we have. You know, AI is very good in a very small way, but it doesn't allow us to incorporate these systems in a complex world we're in. So we need to broaden up the functionality level and make sure that these systems can collaborate, first of all, with each other, so system to system, but also system to human. So that's the second area where we need to focus on. And the third area is something that was already mentioned, that's the trustworthiness. If we are unable to create the trust level in the systems by making them more transparent, explainable, people will just not adopt them. And I think, and I'm absolutely a believer that these three topics are very much close to the European, I'd say, DNA. You know, especially on energy efficiency. I mean, that's where we are squeezed between China and US. But we can make a leading, you know, region on a focus, which is also aligned to, you know, the Green Deal, Green AI, etc. So it would be great to see some more work and some more focus on that part. You know, the link between sustainability and AI. I think Europe can really lead on this. Now, if you ask me about the sectors, I think the sectors that are having a big, you know, big demand for the next generation AI is, of course, a health towards preventive AI and predictive and preventive AI, personalized, preventive health, personalized health. And the second one I'm seeing quite a lot and quite a lot of initiatives as well, also from a research perspective, is everything broadly on the sustainability goals. There's a huge area where AI can create a lot of benefits. Of course, next to the general ones, which are already ongoing manufacturing. But these two areas, they will just really show the value that AI can bring, a value which is not always transparent right now to the audience.
Thank you very much, Mika. Pavel, what do you think? What do you think about Mika's views regarding the impact of AI on two sectors, specifically in the healthcare sector and sustainability sector? Do you have something to add to that? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
No, I'm not the AI expert, but what we see is actually, especially COVID now opened the new areas that were not really thought or penetrated before. So from this perspective, I fully agree with that. And I already mentioned it. I mean, AI is on the beginning of its exploration phase, right? I mean, there are plenty of ideas what to do. Now there will be a little bit of phase of frustration, how to implement them properly. But I think it was also mentioned by Mika that basically we still didn't penetrate the complex solution with AI. And I think it will actually, it might actually be one of the deals that might actually help Europe to get where it used to be and where it belongs, right? Because all this connected and the adaptability and facing new challenges is actually something that Europe was proven by centuries that we always managed, right? So hopefully this new challenge that was partly caused by, or maybe speeded up by COVID, might actually help us to bring us further as Europe.
Yes, I understand. I also want to touch upon one other really important part of the question, the debate on automation, which is the widening skills gap and therefore widening inequalities as well. What are your views on that, and how can you tackle that? Maybe that could be a question directed to Nikolai. What should we do about the skills gaps? What would be the most feasible policy solutions to that? Because it seems like it's kind of inevitable these days.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. Thank you for bringing up this question, because it leads me to aspects which I've already mentioned. And it's indeed that if we want to make the best use of the opportunities offered by AI and by the latest technologies. Of course, we need to be sure that we are able to manage the transitions between certain jobs that might ensue, as Pavel pointed out earlier. But indeed, what we need to do, as I said, is to focus on skills, and we need to focus on to focus on equipping the people with the skills they need to succeed. And these are, as I had touched upon and mentioned earlier, these are the sort of skills which are inherently human, such as ability to negotiate complex social relationships or to foster creative, complex reasonings, a sort of a soft skills, transversal skills, also general cognitive skills, as Mike pointed out. AI, machine learning, now the latest exemplification of AI, it's not really good at reasoning. So these are the sort of skills that we need to really sort of underline. Also, beyond these skills, you also need to actually focus, and what we're also doing at trying to promote at European level is to focus on the pressing need to support people with insufficient basic skills, which are basic digital skills, but also basic reading and literacy skills, which surprisingly, if you're unaware, it's really 1 in 5 Europeans are still struggling with reading or writing, and 42% of EU citizens, they lack at least basic digital skills. So you can imagine in this people with poor literacy and numeracy or lacking digital skills, finding a job in this new economy, it's not going to be hard, but it's not going to be impossible. So these are the sort of skills and challenges that we're thinking towards.
Thank you very much. We actually have a question from the audience, which is actually very much linked to the solutions to the potential digital device as well. And the question is actually directed to every speaker. And the question is whether the universal basic income can become necessary to ensure continued demand for output and a sustainable society. If yes, why? And if not, why? So let's open up the question of UBI. I'm sure that tends to be quite a heated debate. And me, myself, I'm very curious to see how skeptical or how optimistic you are about UBI. So I don't know, David, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Thank you for the question. I definitely think, and also to couple my answer with what my previous speakers have said, is that we're going for a really difficult time in which it's not going to be the same for everyone. For some people, the transition is going to be smoother. For others, it's going to be less smooth. So what I think we as Europeans have to ensure is that we don't leave anybody behind. And for those people who have been, for instance, displaced of their jobs because of enhanced automation caused by the health crisis, there should be a safety net for them to survive in the coming months and maybe even the coming year until things stabilize. I see, to be honest, personally, UBI as being the solution. However, I'm also, let's say, not entirely sure that it can be implemented at the European scale yet, but we already see examples of similar initiatives, not UBI per se, but a conditional basic income is being, or actually has started to be implemented in Spain. And I read actually just last week that Germany is beginning a universal basic income trial with people getting over 1,000 euros for the next 3 years. So there's experiments which are encouraging, and I think eventually we will get to something as close to UBI as possible, because I don't see any other way to protect people in the future from such unforeseen health crises or any other, let's say, maybe climate-related disasters, which take many people by surprise. And again, not all of us are as prepared to do upskilling and reskilling as everybody else, and we have to make sure people have the safety net to do these things in their own time and in their own sort of a healthy way, not to be put under too much pressure, so to say. Maybe one thing to add, which is to add to what Nikolai mentioned, besides the digital skills, the general cognitive skills, which I think are essential for people going forward, even if it's not crisis time in general, it's very important. I would add also another dimension, which I like to call the growth mindset skill set, which is another cluster, sometimes disregarded or not seen as the sort of a key priority, but I see it as an essential cluster. It encompasses everything from resilience, grit, skills that are especially relevant in times of crisis, but even throughout your lifetime. And I think growth mindset, which has been popularized by Carol Dweck, maybe some of you have seen her TED Talk, is something which we should instill in our children very early on, which I think is another quality important to have. And I'm going to stop here, but thank you again for your question.
Any other views on UBI? Any volunteers with strong opinions?
No, I'm just going to add to the skill set. I'm speaking here with a female hat on. What I find personally, I'm asked quite a lot to talk about women in STEM, women in technical jobs, etc. And for me, there's too much, programs forcing almost women to go that direction as being, the place to be. And I don't agree, because it's been said a couple of times, and I don't want to judge either that it's all women, but we shouldn't forget that softer skills, they are going to be very, very important next to data and technology. Skills in collaboration, skills on empathy, skills where we can put ourselves in the state of mind of the other person, making the translation work. We don't need to have experts on deep dive topics everywhere. We need to have more people that can build bridges between business and engineers, engineers and legal people and governmental people, etc. And so I would like to, to see more focus on the fact that this is very valuable as well. I find too much in the programs that it's almost like this is not needed. If you look at COVID, and that's a reflection I made myself quite a lot looking into it, and you look at the role that nurses have had in this pandemic, this is not something that AI can do. AI couldn't even tip in what nurses were doing. So we should go towards a domain where there's more humbleness, and we were just actually lifting up the people that are down here and just bringing down people should, the top people who think that they're at the top, they should be more humble and recognize the value that everybody brings in this society. And I find this that, this polarization is too large right now. There should be more humbleness towards the other direction, and seeing that skills like social skills, state of mind, empathy, creativity, etc., are as valuable towards the future and engineering, data, and technology skills. And that's my view as a woman.
I couldn't agree more. Of course, go ahead,
I also very much agree, because we praise a lot of technical skills at the moment. And we spend a lot of effort in making diversity, but I think that we should also look at this aspect that you just described. I mean, if I look at the skills, and there were multiple searches what will be needed in the next 5-10 years, and first 5 skills were always very technical, but fortunately 6, 7, 8 were always the people skills, and I think that we should not underestimate those. And as for the diversity, I mean, the diversity should be general. It's not only gender diversity, but still we have a gap in our mindsets. I mean, including me. If I look at the ratio of women on technical schools, which is actually valid for every technical company in Central Europe, I mean, this is really unsatisfactory. And if you look at you are from IA fields, if I look at the cloud computing, for instance, there is, I don't know, 10% of women. It's surprising.
Yes, I mean, I have noticed a lot of initiatives across the CE region related to both technical skills and female leadership in technical skills, such as Czechitas in Czech Republic or Go Carrots, I believe, in Poland. So there are several kind of, I would say, like smaller scale initiatives, which could serve as a great example for some larger scale reforms. But as we all know, these kind of long-term policy changes are sometimes hard to push politically, or not being as prioritized as they really should be. So this does tend to be problematic. So what should we do? Kind of like an open question towards everyone. We all know that education is important, and in order to achieve some sort of a long-term change, it is important to instill push through really massive education reforms across the whole of EU, with the exception of several countries which are ahead, for example Estonia. So what should be done? How should we kind of like make this happen?
I can start with a quick comment on your question. It's that I think the solution is not, let's say, a solution caused by the current context. I think the COVID-19 crisis, as with everything else, it's a magnifying glass. That's how I see this crisis. It showed, not just in our education system, but in our society, some of the things that can be improved, and some of the things that can still remain the same, and they're fine now. When it comes to the education sector, what I think it highlights a lot is first of all, the inequality between people who have access to education and those who haven't, which is, I think, a huge issue to tackle for many countries in Europe and abroad. And another issue is the fact that schools still prepare young people for jobs that don't yet exist. So they should focus a lot more on building transferable skills in young people. That's one thing, which is both the soft skills some of you mentioned, but also digital skills the others mentioned, and the growth mindset skills as well. And very importantly, and I think this is my solution, which maybe is only now being more and more discussed, is to bring universities and higher education in general more closely in line with companies. Because at least in the country where I come from, in Romania, companies have been, let's say, complaining for some years now that the students they get, as young graduates, as young trainees in their companies, they have to re-educate them in some sense. They're not learning enough practical skills that would enable them to start a job and thrive in it. They literally have to go through another preparation when they start a job, which should not be the case. So I think a closer collaboration between higher education and the companies, be it SMBs, but also large companies in the countries, would be beneficial to prepare people for the future of work.
I couldn't agree more, and I think there's a big deficit, especially in the Central Eastern European countries. What is your perspective, Mika? You coming from the Netherlands, is the collaboration between the private sector and universities any better?
No, maybe just a small tiny correction. I'm from Belgium, but in Belgium the system is very much still like I used to have it when I was 20, 30 years ago, which means there's a lot of learning out of the head, not by experience, not by playing. I was very bad in school because I didn't understand that. I didn't see the relationship between the things I was studying and how that could be relevant for my job later. And it's only when I started, looking into companies and like the person just mentioned, by talking to companies, understanding what's relevant in what I'm learning and what should I learn and what should I not learn, that I started seeing the relationship. And I find that there's no change, at least not in the Belgian system, or not enough change to make youngsters from 12 years, 8 years, even 6 years old dream, and see what it could mean later on, see the relationship between the formulas they see right now and where it actually ends. When I talk to young people, and I take a lot of time to talk to young people, you see lots of people, stopping school because of this reason, even today. Let them play, let them learn by experience. Don't make robots out of people by, learning out of the head. They don't understand the content, they don't see it. And this is for me, that's missing far too much. At least I speak for Belgium, but I compare it to what my children seeing here, and I am surprised. I'd love to see that changing.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think our time is unfortunately coming to an end, and we really appreciate the time and your insights. It's been very, very interesting. So thank you very much for the engaging discussion. And even though we are wrapping up the program for today, the GlobSec Digital Stage also continues tomorrow, starting at 1 p.m. Central European Time, and we'll be hosting more exciting speakers, including the Belarusian opposition leader, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. So thank you very much again. Stay with us and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.